Director of Engagement Programs, and I want to tell you about a couple of things we have coming up the rest of this week before I turn the conversation over to our wonderful panel. So we have Luis Orozco with us for the rest of this week. He's doing a number of school visits and artist residency visits, but we also have a few more public events this week. On Thursday night, we'll be doing a public master class with the Omaha Conservatory of Music with some of their vocal music students at 7 p.m. if you'd like to join us. And then on Sunday, we will be at Gallery 1516 for a recital as part of the Bagels and Sometimes Bach concert series. That's free and open to the public. As promised by the name, there are bagels, and that starts at 11:30 on Sunday. So we have two more Pasquale-related events for the rest of this week. A note about our panel this evening: Xavier was unfortunately unable to join us at the last moment, and so we have a wonderful panel. I was overhearing their tones while they were doing speaker prep, and so I know that you're in for a great discussion. Our moderator tonight is Diane Martinez, and Hannah Clark will be on the panel. You have bio in front of you, but I'm very excited for them to talk a little bit about Pasquale. Of course, they'll open it up to all of you for your thoughts and feelings and comments about the opera as well. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Diana and Hannah.
Thank you, Lauren. Yay. All right, hello, everyone.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to begin. I'm going to begin with a big question, Hannah.
Okay.
It is my favorite question that I came up with because I think it's very clever.
Okay.
All right. So as you know, people say, unclear who first said it, Mark Twain, Lenny Bruce, Carol Burnett, but comedy equals tragedy plus time. What are the tragedies of Don Pasquale?
Oh, jumping right into it. All right. Yes, I think what's funny about that is not all tragedies equal comedy plus time, right? To be intentional about that. I think that the tragedy, Don Pasquale, is one, the tragedy of age and aging. It's one that we all have to navigate in our own ways. And to see someone who's more mature later in life and is feeling lonely, is feeling missing that verve of being the handsome bachelor that everybody wanted. And he's feeling that, he's missing that, and he's missing having family around him. Of course, the irony there is that he's pushing his family away and going to disown Ernesto. But he thinks about it, right? He wants a bunch of children playing around him, and like who has, if fortunate enough to age up to 70, doesn't miss having young people around them and kids and all these things that now he's realizing he's missed out on, just as he's denying them to Ernesto. So that's that beginning tragedy that I think propels him to act a bit of a fool and try to marry someone wildly younger than him. But I also think that then it's the potential tragedy there at the end that we avoid, but that's still like the shadow is there, right? But that tragedy of now you have deeply mistreated this old man, and you've tricked him, you lied to him, and now he thinks all his friends have betrayed him, and you humiliated him. Like, there's a lot going on there that, it hurts to watch. And so the line there of like, we're rooting for the couple. We want Don Pasquale to learn his lesson because he's being ridiculous. But the choice that he makes at the end to say, "Oh, you guys got me. Oh, you got me. Oh, good. Oh, thank goodness that I was mistaken and you all pulled the trick on me. Everything's okay." That choice is so critical because there's a version of the story that doesn't end well. It's not a comedy, right? When we were speaking earlier, I talked about Merchant of Venice. I'm a big Shakespeare lady. That's my wheelhouse, so I'll be comparing things to Shakespeare a lot. You'll have to forgive me. Thank you for your patience. But Merchant of Venice is considered a problem play in Shakespeare's canon because of the ending. It is a comedy, ostensibly, right? We have a curmudgeon, Shylock, who's taught a lesson by his sort of nephew, right? But the ending is a little problematic. And so people have to stage it really intentionally because that play ends with Shylock losing his community, losing his family, losing his money, losing his standing amongst people, and really being ostracized. So it's challenging because it is a tragedy in that way. Back in Shakespeare's time, they viewed it more as a comedy for various reasons. But now, in the present tense, you have to be very intentional with your staging, and some people have adapted it so that Shylock is brought back into the community and has more of like, okay, you guys were right, I shouldn't be so tight-fisted with all of my wealth. I'm going to change my ways, we're all going to learn from this together. And so what I love about Don Pasquale is that the ending scene, right, he's trying to get up on the bench, but he can't quite because, it's his back. But he has that moment there, that triumphant moment of feeling young and energetic again, and everyone is giving their focus and their attention to him. And so you realize that, okay, he's learning that he doesn't need his money to feel loved and welcomed by his community. That's all he wanted. He just wanted to feel connected to everyone and to have people celebrate him. He doesn't have to marry a young nun to achieve that. He can get that by being kind and supportive to the family that he already has.
So you bringing up Shakespeare makes me have a question, because I think like the opera canon, obviously like Shakespeare, but there's like these small pockets of work that I think are just like redone over and over again and have like centuries of history. Like, what do you think is the key to keeping these old texts alive, even when they aren't contemporized? Like, they can still be staged as they were, right? As they were in the 18th century, but like, how do you think, what do you think is like the key to like keeping them resonant?
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important too that we are honoring what parts of the past make them special, right? Like, please sing Don Pasquale in Italian. Please keep it an opera, and don't try to like modernize that language, because the poetry and the elegance is in the language. So you can have the craft of handling something as elegant as a full Italian libretto, but then you take that classic craft and you infuse it with energy of like real living people right now, and that's where you get your modernity. Like, they don't have to be dressed as modern people. We just have to feel like they understand the things that we're feeling, and that all comes from approaching the character with that like modern energy. And that's what I loved about everybody in this cast. I was so impressed. They tackled it. I was like, oh my God, Don Pasquale is my grandpa. Like, there he is, coming out, like, all excited. And there he is. And, like, I feel like I know a Norina in my life. And I know an Ernesto, like, dramatic, like, who has not seen a 14-year-old just like, on the floor. I can't go on, it's so hard. And so understanding that the people back then felt that same way that we feel now. It's just the situations are different, and the vehicle that we're being presented in, whether it's Shakespeare's elevated language or the beautiful opera, there's still like that human story in there. So like finding that and making it relevant to yourself. Yeah, that's it. That's huge. Nailed it. I was impressed. 10 points. 2 thumbs up.
I mean, I think you have something there, because I think one of the things that is difficult is comedy.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think that part, especially like the sentimentality and the drama, I think to me seems maybe easier for a modern audience to access, but it's like comedy that is outdated very quickly.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you, as somebody who works in Shakespeare and things that are also like comedic but need to be updated all the time. Like, how do you create effective humor on stage?
Okay, so yes, and yes to all of that, right? Because when you're talking about comedy, it's so funny, because in Shakespeare you'll see it. You'll see a line where you're like, what does that line even mean? And you research it and you're like, oh, it's a joke.
It was funny.
It was funny. That was funny to them. It means nothing to me now, but I guess back then that was what was comedy. And so that's humbling. We have to remind ourselves that like so much of comedy is responding situationally. But that same recipe, you can just use that to respond situationally, right? Like, there's that authenticity there. So something we do in old school Shakespeare Omaha, which is the group that I captain, is we do encourage people that, like, if there is a reference, if there's a joke that you don't understand, how can you make that joke relevant to you? How can it land? And so the physical comedy, physical humor in the show, I was so impressed with, because every single moment there were these bits going on. So the three things that I really was impressed with was, one, the use of games. So when you're staging a show, especially a comedic one, you want to establish like games. You want to say like, here's the rules of this scene. So I'm thinking about Marina when she comes and she's like, I'm the new mistress of this house, and she gets the servants, and the servants following Marina. Follow the leader. We've got it right there. They're following Narina around the room. So Narina is the leader, and they just keep following her. But now it gets funny. Narina's dodging all over because she wants to avoid Don Pasquale. So now we have another rule. Okay, Narina's going all over the room. She's going around the couch. She's going up, down. Don Pasquale is trying to catch her, but he can't. And so it's so relatable, because we as kids, everyone's played like tag or follow the leader. And so that visual comedy tells the story of her like commanding the space, that the servants are totally in line with her because she's promising to pay them more. Like, it speaks all those levels, but then it's so simple to just be like, ha ha, oh, poor Don Pasquale, he can't even catch her. Oh, there she goes. All right, oh, now she's over there. All right, excellent. Hiding behind a couch. Like, just those really simple things, so if you can layer those in. Or when playing pretend, too. That's a perfect game. So Don Pasquale, when he does his first song, and he takes off his robe, and he's dancing with the robe, and then he's tempting the bull with his robe, right? Like, that prop work, bringing the props in, that would probably be the second one, is like prop work as games. I'm thinking about when Ernesto had the globe, and he like goes to stab himself with the globe because he's like, oh, my life is over, no. Yeah, or the dogs, the golden dogs, man. Those whoever bought those dogs, I want to shake their hand, because time and time again, the way that the characters interacted with them, Don Pasquale or Ernesto petting it, like, I've got to leave, buddy, I'll miss you, golden dog. Don Pasquale being like, no, you can't throw away my golden dog, I love this one. And like being covetous of that, like that speaks to these universal themes. Really intentionally, so using the props, so it's not just like a set dressing, it's a part of the world, and let's play with that, playing with everything. And then the third thing is asides. So like, asides are huge in Shakespeare, and that's just a term for when two people are in a scene, they're talking, and then the actor leans out at the audience and goes, oh, here's what I really think, or like, this guy's an idiot. And you saw that a lot in Don Pasquale. It was all those parentheticals, right? And they nailed them. They were so funny. It was, and singing too, full opera. I was just like, blown away. So they'd be giggling like, oh yes, Don Pasquale, I'm just a shy, blushing violet. This guy's an idiot, and he's gonna fall for it. Ha! Oh yes, of course, yes sir. Oh, like back and forth like that. And you see it a lot in Shakespeare as well. And the Shakespeare that we do in my group is actually in a bar. So that's our whole thing. We do Shakespeare in a bar because it more directly replicates the actual circumstances that Shakespeare performed in, which was a bunch of people who weren't all necessarily like academics, drinking, hanging out in community. And so one thing that I absolutely love about that form is that when you do an aside as an actor, the people are right there. I mean, you will literally like say an aside and someone will be like, oh, you're talking to me, hello, okay. And that's the point of them. It's that you're bringing the audience in so that they can laugh along with the joke, right? Because we're all in on the joke. It's so hard to do in a stage like the Orpheum because it's huge, you've got spotlights on you, you can't see the audience to connect with them, and yet all of the performers had this fabulous energy of switching back and forth from talking in the scene and then really sharing the joke with us. So that was just like very, very nicely done.
Well, you mentioned energy. Like, what is the difference in energy, like going from like a comedy to like a tragedy? Like, how do you pace or sustain your energy throughout a production?
I mean, hopefully you're a professional performer because their energy, like, whoo, Don Pasquale, he was just, he was all over that stage, he was going all over the place. And you do have to have a lot of energy in a comedy because if you want everyone to be excited and be having a good time, you have to be excited and be having a good time. Even if you're doing something that is not, why would you be excited about like, oh, I'm really gonna trick my uncle, oh boy, I'm gonna show him. But because the characters are so excited about it, we get excited, right? We're mirroring creatures, humans are. And so seeing Don Pasquale become so excited about, oh, my young bride, and have this like giddy, childlike energy. It's all about contrasts. I think we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but contrast is comedy. So older man acting like a child, contrast, hilarious, right? Norina pretending to be this very shy, submissive woman. Actually, she turns out that she can have a terror inside of her. Big contrast there. And then Don Pasquale realizing, oh gosh, I made a terrible mistake, right? Anytime there's a big contrast, that just delights us because it's farcical that way. Yeah. Hope I answered your question.
You did, yeah. Well, okay, so that
Yeah.
that answers to me the question of like, this is what the what the actors have to give to the audience on stage. But I think the other part that needs to work in order to make any story work, right, is like the motivation needs to be understandable and it needs to be there.
Oh yeah.
So I have some questions. Like,
Okay.
what is Malatesta's motivation?
Oh, Dr. Malatesta, don't get me started on that guy. Oh my gosh.
What does he want? Why does he do this?
Why? First of all, medical negligence, like that, the Don Pasquale is going to have a stroke about all this stuff happening, and there's no forgiving that. I think Malatesta had this fabulous energy of really knowing Don Pasquale, and anybody who has a very intimate relationship with their medical provider will be like, yeah, my doctor knows things about me nobody else knows. And so I'm going to give Dr. Malatesta the benefit of the doubt and say that he knows Don Pasquale is stubborn. He's a stubborn old man. And I think that he genuinely believes Don Pasquale marrying someone significantly younger is a bad idea, right? Not only could he be taken advantage of by any number of people with ill intent, but also he knows his health. He knows. So I think that he's probably saving Don Pasquale's pride a little bit by not just being like, hey, bud, you're not going to have any children. I'm so sorry. Probably not.
Yeah.
So then, okay, he's presented with these truths, right? My friend is committed to this path that will cause him sorrow and disappointment. He's also committed to this path that's hurting the only person who cares about him other than the doctor, which is Ernesto, right? So he's pushing away his family members. He's super committed to like putting himself in a very compromising position. Maybe I could A, talk to him as his best friend and advisor, or B, I could cook up a crazy scheme that's really gonna shock and humble him and teach him a real lesson. So I would personally go with option A, but maybe he already tried that. And option B is all that he has left to him. Yeah. I think it comes down to we do not appreciate what we have until we lose it, right? That old adage. And Don Pasquale is not appreciating the family he already has. He wants this idea of family instead of the real family that he has, and he could have if he lets Ernesto and Norina marry, right? There could be a bunch of babies running around you. Just gotta let these two, yeah, they just won't be his. And so, he loves his money, he loves his status and his pride and his reputation, what people think about him. And so, in the classic comedy way, Dr. Malatesta is like, well, you're gonna lose all that stuff, or you're gonna think that you've lost all of it, in order so that when we say, surprise, we were kidding, here it is all back, you will really appreciate it for what it is, and that will help you to release some of that. Now, this is not a Malatesta defense line, because I still think he's ridiculous, and it could have failed so many times. Like when Ernesto walks in and Malatesta's like, no, it's cool, don't worry, this is for your own well-being. It is a miracle that works. Like everything up to that point of Ernesto that we have seen is that he's incredibly melodramatic and he just like, oh. So the fact that he stops in that moment and is like, oh, okay, this is, okay, I will stay quiet. Yeah, he should be freaking out. Yeah. He should be taking the gold dog and throwing it through the window. Like that is the Ernesto we have seen. So I think that Malatesta got away with a lot.
What do you believe Norina's motivation? Why does she go along with this? That's my question.
Right, because were I a young woman of that situation, I would be like, how is this gonna let me marry Ernesto? Like what?
Yeah, it seems like marrying someone else is probably not gonna lead to that.
Yeah, marrying someone else isn't gonna help you get married to someone else. Yeah, there we go. Not to bash her, but I think it is revenge. I think she's really upset at Don Pasquale for ruining her love story with Ernesto. And I think she lets it get a little personal, which is why things get a little out of hand, or in hand, you know what I mean? Because I think that once she starts tasting that power, and the tables are turned, and now she gets to, in the way that she feels Don Pasquale has victimized her and denied her happy ending, she gets to do that to Don Pasquale, and I think she loves it. I think she's like, oh, ha ha ha, finally. One thing I will say is Norina has great taste. So what I loved about the set is that it's all like, oh, drab, Don Pasquale, and then she takes over, and it's like, ooh, fresh, yeah, it's gorgeous.
Dress.
She has great taste. I'm like, yes, girl, excellent.
Speaking of Norina, what do you make of her? I think she is a character who obviously would exist within Shakespeare's world of strong female characters, but in the tradition of other operas or commedia dell'arte or Restoration theater, those type of characters are few and far between. So what do you think of the character of Norina? What do you make of her?
I was so impressed by her. I was delighted because the first scene she comes, right, because you hear about this girl, she has no money, and you hear about this girl, okay, she's poor, and Ernesto's not allowed to marry her, okay, I wonder what she like. And she comes out and she's like, I am sassy, and I like to make fun of love stories, and I have my girls, and I'm very confident, this energy. That was immediately very refreshing and exciting. So you get to see her little vignette of character. But she still does care very deeply about Ernesto. You can tell that. And I really enjoyed her as a character because that respecting women, right? The undertones of this piece is that she totally defies the idea of a wife that Don Pasquale wants. He wants someone who's very demure and shy and reserved and will follow his orders and all of that, when really he needs to learn some lessons from a woman because he has been so removed from that and has not had anyone to counsel him in the ways of love. And so the fact that she is such a good actress and that she gets to be so inside the joke, right? Because inside the joke is where the power is. And so it turns everything on its head, back to contrast being a part of comedy, that the wealthy man is not in a position of power. And that is so antithetical, especially during this time. So the wealthy man is not in power. The poorer, lower class woman is in power because of her competency, because of her confidence, because of these things that are not usually valued, as we can see by Don Pasquale, in a wife. It's got that Mulan energy, right? How about a woman who speaks her mind? And everyone's like, nah, we don't want that. But Ernesto does, and she's got that. She's got that in buckets. I like it. Big fan. And the fashion sense. Icon. When they replaced the eagle, the very Tudor, they replaced it with a portrait of her. I was like, yes.
I did notice that. I was like, so does she have that done for herself?
Immediately, in 2 hours.
See, this is what I like about her. She sticks to the plan. She really does just spend all his money.
She was on it. I was like, I
hope Ernesto has something to inherit.
Right.
That's my question.
Yeah, she's been thinking about this clearly because you can't really spend that much money in 5 hours, and she's on it. She's like, characters, this, yeah. Just forced to be reckoned with, and I love that. I love that in all characters, and especially women. So it's a good show.
Hannah, what is the moral of this story?
Okay. Well, if you go by the ending song, it's that you shouldn't get married if you're 70 and the other person is 20, which is good advice, generally, yes. But I think that that's a little bit of a cover because the best comedies, right, are a way for us to take our medicine with a spoonful of sugar, right? They are there to present us with these ridiculous characters that we can laugh at, but also acknowledge that they are mirrors of ourselves. And that's where the real work happened, is underneath it. So I think especially for the time that it was created in, Ruffini and Donizetti were like, okay, we gotta keep it light, we gotta keep it fun, we're gonna wrap it up being like, see everybody, don't be crazy and get married like this. But under that is the real like morals, right? And we see in everybody's arc a fabulous bit of growth, which is delightful, right? So like Marina, let's maybe not slap our elders because that, yeah, it's a good lesson because she goes a little bit too far, right? And in that moment, she's like, oh, I can actually be not the kind of person that I want to be if I let that happen, right? I can do things that, and that confidence, right? Tempering that confidence is sometimes important. And then Don Pasquale, his journey of the classic, what you want, you could already have. It's right in front of you, but it doesn't look the way that you think it should look. And I think that's there. There's also a bit of pushback on the traditional patriarchal model of inheritance, right? Which has, plagued a lot of people for a very long time. But Don Pasquale is so committed to that, right? Like, I will have a child, he will inherit all of my money, and then all my money is safe and my legacy is complete. Instead of shifting his view of legacy to include community, to include his servants, to include his distant family and the potential progeny of his nephew, right? And that if we dispel that myth that in order to, successfully pass, you must have a big check instead of that idea of sowing many seeds and reaping at the full garden. And I think it's so wild that this opera was pushing back on that in the 1800s when we're just now returning to kind of more of that model of inheritance, which is less, it's more decentralized. And I think that was very cool. Yeah, so that's my 7 morals of the story. We've got the top of the cake. Don't get married to someone who's drastically younger than you. They might be a gold digger. That was really what Malatesta was doing. He was like, Pasquale, gold diggers, they exist.
Right.
What are you doing? Because he could have very well been taken advantage of by somebody who was not, his friend. Or he could have ended up making some poor Catholic circle, which is probably what would have happened. All the way down to the deep, how am I existing in my community? How am I leaving a legacy? Yeah.
What do you think the opera has to say about love and marriage and relationships?
I mean, you gotta marry for love, right? That's the energy, and it's a classic refrain, but it's still very important to have shows like that. It's that message that love can help us become the people we want to be. It can help us grow into the people that we think we are, but we're not quite there yet. We could actually be those people. Nerina wants to be this confident metropolitan woman, but once she gets the dress and she gets the money and she gets the status, she still doesn't feel that confidence, right? She's still doubting herself, she's still playing tricks, and it's not until she's with Ernesto and they're out in the moonlight and she can sing with him that she actually feels that confident, that she steps into her power. Ernesto wants to be a competent husband, but he's a dramatic child. And it's not until he stops and listens to Malatesta, to Nerina, that he realizes oh, okay, actually I can let other people teach me and show me the way. And and then Pasquale.
I found him the most relatable.
Yeah, oh yeah. The Ernesto energy. Yeah, I was watching and this woman behind me goes, so dramatic. He gets me. Yes, that big Ernesto energy. Yeah, so that if you marry for the wrong reasons, it's not going to end well. Pasquale marries for his pride and marries to punish his nephew, and that doesn't work. And Ernesto is not going to marry Nerina because of money. So even though he gets disowned, he still doesn't marry Nerina. He's like, I'm going to leave. I'm going to seek a distant land. And that is because he genuinely thinks his worth as a human being is his money. He believes that Nerina would be worse off married to him. Right, and that she won't love him because he doesn't have his money anymore. So he's like, Nerina, I lost my money. I'm going to leave so that you don't have to share my life of squalor. And Nerina's like, I'm already poor. Now I'm poor and I don't have a husband because you're leaving. So Ernesto seeing that his value can be in music and love and these things that he's really good at. It doesn't have to be in money, because he's not good at money. Anyway, you're asking me so many questions. I hope if you please also share your thoughts. Please share your thoughts, Danny.
I'll share thoughts at some point.
Oh. That was threatening me with a good time.
I have a couple questions, fun questions, that I want to use to help open it up to the audience, and then we can talk about anything else that you want to discuss. So this opera has been produced by many different operas, but I think what's really interesting is like when the setting has changed. So like Atlanta Opera, Minnesota Opera, Pittsburgh Opera, Fort Worth did a production of this set in 1950s Hollywood, where Don Pasquale was like an aging silent film star, kind of past his prime, like looking for a new starlet to kind of revitalize his life. So my question is, how would you, or what time and place would you take Don Pasquale?
Ooh, that's very fun. The first one that pops into my head would be to do kind of like a Silicon Valley, like modern day, like a tech giant kind of energy. So get like a Bill Gates sort of, like a dark Bill Gates timeline where he, it's just, I had all this money and this influence and this power, and his nephew is like a very like nepo, doesn't know any practical life skills, but just has like a Ferrari and is like, I can do it. And Norina works at a coffee shop and is very, kind of has this like disregard for people in that like 1%, and then it's not until she is forced into this scheme that she can actually acknowledge Don Pasquale's like humanity, and that Don Pasquale can be like, oh yeah, I do live in an ivory tower made of MacBooks, perhaps. That would be, what do you think? Where would you want to see it?
It's a good question, Lee.
Either that or like the like Prohibition kind of Roaring 20s energy. So we've got like a
Gatsby energy.
Yeah, big Art Deco finery. Yeah, that kind of mostly Norina the Flapper. I'm just putting that in the world.
or any of those eras, because like there's such a like class critique here. So I think any of those eras where there's like just right for that, so like Gilded Age, right, Roaring 20s. I don't know, like French Revolution.
I was thinking France, like especially with the way the like structures, like it almost looks like at the end scene when you go like Cityscape and like the blue sky, that they're on the like the Eiffel Tower. Like it just has real like that kind of
So I think that would really open up like all of those things that are simmering about like class and what you can and cannot do like when you have money, but also the kind of like for Ernesto, right? The kind of demands that come with having money, which is like he feels like he needs to marry a certain type of person, and that excludes the person that he loves. And like I unfortunately really like love those stories of like there are trappings to that privilege as well. That everybody is struggling, that the system, it harms everyone, because Ernesto thinks that his entire value is in his inheritance and not in himself as like a musician and a person. And that stinks. That makes him make bad decisions. Definitely. And then the other question that I have, which is related. So I actually studied, I have a PhD in film and media studies, and I studied comedy and film and television comedy in particular. So when I was watching this, I was just thinking of a sitcom. And so my question to you is, if this was a movie, who would you cast?
Okay, I'm so bad with actor names, so you'll have to help me, but in Modern Family, one of the gay dads, who he's the bigger one, and he's kind of got like Ernesto. Like, can't you just see him like, like falling on the floor? He's very funny. And then Nick Cage as Don Pasquale.
Oh my God!
Did you get it? Like with the toupee?
Okay, that man is a thespian,
He is.
okay? Like he
He's
would
an
do it.
actor.
He's an actor.
Yeah, but still like that childlike energy, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what I love about the Don Pasquale and how Jarrell plays him.
I love that.
Is like very much like in body, physically
Yeah.
of age, but then so giddy and so childlike, and like everything reads so transparently on his face, and I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Aubrey Plaza from Parks and Recreation as Norina. Yeah, like that, the kind of deadpan.
Being able to move between those different.
Yes, yeah, she's great. I would love to see her. Yeah, I want to hear everybody else's dream casts.
Yeah. Let's open it up. Answer that question, and then also anything else that you want to bring to this discussion. I have one thing to contribute. I'm saying Russell Crowe as Don Pasquale because he would take it so seriously, it's hilarious.
Oh, and Benedict Cumberbatch as Dr. Malatesta.
All right.
Yeah. Mhm, mhm.
He schemes.
He does, and he's got that refinement to sort of, you know. There was a lot of this about Dr. Malatesta. Yeah, and then they could do the back and forth fencing scene. Oh my gosh, that was so fun. Oh, they were so good at that. And then they peek their little heads out the curtain. And they're like, oh, yeah, very sitcom energy.
Yeah.
Like physical comedy. Yeah. Dreamcasts, lay them on me. I want to know.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say kudos off of Omaha. What a way to start the new season. First time I saw this production was when the Met was doing the free live streams during COVID. Anna Netrebko was Norina, and but this production was every bit as good as that. I mean, it's so well directed, so well acted and sung. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was fantastic.
I enjoyed it too. Yeah, I was very impressed because you can, there is a way to do Don Pasquale poorly, right? And the Don comes off as weird and creepy and too randy, and Norina comes off as too like abusive, right? Like there's
But also just stage comedy is hard.
it's just hard. Like it can get stale, and the fact that they had it so well directed and so lively and so energetic, but everyone had this like authentic innocence of like we're just here to find what will fill that hole in our hearts. I was very impressed. Thank you for saying that.
I would agree with that comment. I would say maybe this was my dream cast because I think they did it so well and so authentically, and the voices were so amazing, and the acting was absolutely excellent. The comic timing was perfect. I really loved it. I mean, I don't think I was particularly a fan of this opera before. I mean, it was okay and it had beautiful music, but boy, I was blown away by this production.
Yeah, it was always something to be watching.
Yeah.
Part of it comes down to actively listening. You cannot have comedic timing unless you are really focused on your scene partners and you're watching what they're doing. Because if you're not, you're going to miss something and then you're not reacting authentically. So like, and the active listening, you could just feel it off of these people. And they've done this so many times, right? So many times. But they were still right there reacting to each other. So, yeah, very impressed. Also, James Corden, who played, he would be great in this. I would do that. Just saying. Just gonna keep putting those out there. Can't stop thinking.
Any other reactions, thoughts, answers to the questions? This is your chance to talk to each other and us about what you thought about the opera.
I have a question. So
Go for it.
when Ernesto and Dr. Malatesta were singing, I think it was after the fencing, and they poked their heads out of the curtain, and they were going really fast. Were they really saying something? They just kept going, it was like gibberish. And so were they really speaking? Or was it just phonetic sounds?
So there is pattern written into the libretto where there are some of those exchanges going back and forth, but I do think that at some point it does get so fast that it is just, it's like when you're listening to it and you'll see the super titles, like they might not have the super title of the words up all the time because they're just like repeating the same thing over and over and over again. And so
missed what they were repeating then. I didn't know, I wanted to know what they were repeating over and over and over again, but I thought it was just gibberish pattern.
Like scatting.
Yeah, yeah. It's just the phonetic sounds to make the notes.
Yeah, I think part of it was, and I may be totally out base here, but I remember them saying like, yes, it's a grand plan, it's a clever plan, it's a very good plan. Kind of like that was a big energy of that song.
And I'm sure the only thing I can relate it to is like if you listen to like rap, right? There's also
Yeah.
certain kind of like diction you can do to make things sound faster than they actually are. Like if you play with like consonants and assonants and like it kind of like is easier to actually vocalize, but also lyrically it sounds much more impressive than like it probably is. That's a good question.
Well, and I didn't know the show before at all, but I didn't get Doctor's point. Why was he after Don Pasquale? You know, Hannah, you mentioned, well, he just wanted to wake him up and get him to think of some sense. But I also felt from the characterization that he was trying to poke him in a way that he had some revenge for him. And it wasn't conveyed to me that was there really revenge. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, did anyone else get that either? Like what is his motivation? Like you're saying that his motivations are pure in a way, right? Of like, look, my friend is going to be disappointed and humiliated if he pursues this situation, so I'm gonna do it to him.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna like control the situation.
Or I'm going to get his money.
Yeah, or is it, some other scheme to like get his money, to ruin him, to...
Yeah, he's just been frustrated, like working with him for all these years, and so he's like, I'm gonna play a trick on you.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah,
Or is
on
it
the
just
scale.
deceitfulness?
Yeah. How much of Iago is in Dr. Malatesta?
Mhm. Yeah. It's a great question.
Any Malatesta defenders? Anybody who's like, he was right 100% of the time.
Malatesta accusers.
Yeah.
Well, I liked Dr. Malatesto. I thought his motivation was pure. As a doctor, I saw him as that, pretty much the way you described it. So, as it ended, everything came together the way he orchestrated it. It's what he wanted for Don Pasquale as his doctor. Yeah.
Right, yeah. I mean, he really does like give him a new lease on life. He changes his perspective. I mean, he gives him a taste of his own medicine, if you'll pardon the doctor pun. Like, you know. And maybe he loves young love, and he sees Ernesto and Marina's intense connection, and he's like, I can't let this die.
But one thing that maybe you can help me with, I know that he wanted to get rid of Ernesto, but I didn't really see the motivation because, I thought Ernesto was kind of lazy and maybe didn't do anything, but it wasn't made clear unless I missed it. So was that in the...
Yeah.
I think he is. I think he is just kind of like this, I think your son of a tech bro analogy was like perfect, right? He's this like privileged kid who is just waiting to inherit this money, and so he's just so like dramatic, but like nothing has really like bad has ever happened to him. Like that's what you get the sense of, right? He's never had to work for anything. This is the major kind of thing in his life. He thinks he's going to go off and live in an island because he doesn't have the woman that he loves. So I think there is a kind of like moral to that side of the story too, which is that like, Ernesto is just waiting to be like handed these things, and when it's his chance to go pursue them, right? Like to marry Norina anyway, to stand up to Don Pasquale and say like, no, this is what I want to do. He just chooses to literally just like throw himself on the floor.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think there's something about his reaction to adversity that signals that he's not someone who's used to adversity.
Yeah, maybe Don Pasquale wants to challenge him. I think it comes down to obstinance. I think it comes to obedience. Because Don Pasquale is like, all right, you're going to marry this girl. And Ernesto's like, no. And Don Pasquale is like, what? I don't like hearing that word. Did I stutter? I said you're going to marry this girl. And Ernesto says, I can't. I just can't. And I don't think that many people have challenged Don Pasquale in his life,
Yeah.
especially not people entirely dependent on his patronage. So I think that challenges his sense of like power and ownership, and he reacts very negatively.
I guess